Jesus never celebrated Christmas, but he did celebrate Hanukkah. In John's Gospel, it records that Jesus was present at the Feast of the Dedication, sometimes called the Festival of Light or Hanukkah. It was there that the Jews attempted to murder him. In this podcast, I will tell you about the meaning of Hanukkah and how Jesus was almost killed at Hanukkah, and an inspiring story of how a menorah like this one saved a Jewish family's life during the Second World War. I was born on the northwest side of Detroit into an almost exclusively Jewish neighborhood. I was born less than 3 years after the terrible sufferings of the Jewish people that we now call the Holocaust. But as a child, I didn't understand any of this. My parents were not Jewish, but there I learned about Jewish culture. On the high Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, all the Jewish students would be gone. There would be only about 3 students in each class. That was all right with me, since we didn't do much in school, and I didn't like school anyway. On some days, the Jewish students would go to Hebrew school after public school, so I wouldn't have anyone to play with. When Jewish boys reached the age of 12, they had a party called their bar mitzvah. I enjoyed being invited to their parties. During the Christmas season, Jewish families celebrated Hanukkah. I thought it was just an excuse for Jewish children to get presents, while all the Gentile students got Christmas presents. But it was much, much more. Later, I realized that Hanukkah was an older holiday than Christmas, and it was deeply rooted in the sufferings and the hope of the Jewish people. But what is Hanukkah, and what does it have to do with the hope for a Messiah or for Christ? Hanukkah has its beginning in the suffering of the Jewish people some 200 years before Jesus of Nazareth. The Syrian king Antiochus Epiphanes, who worshipped the Greek gods, had captured the land of Israel, and he was determined at any price to wipe out Jewish religious knowledge and practice. So he went to the temple in Jerusalem and set up a statue of Zeus, the highest of the Greek gods, in the Holy of Holies. Then he sacrificed a pig in the temple, which was against all Jewish law. This event is sometimes referred to as the Abomination of Desolation. It's recorded in the book of Daniel in the Hebrew Bible in the later chapters. Well, more than that, the king sent his emissaries to all the towns of Israel to prohibit the study of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, forcing the elders also to worship Zeus and even requiring them to eat pork. Many of the elders were afraid and went along. But when the Syrian embassies reached the town of Modedai in Judea, they came up against Judas Maccabees, also known as Judah Maccabees, or sometimes known as the Hammer, who was a Jewish priest. In 167 BC, they killed the emissaries of the king and fled to the hill to begin a revolt. Several years later, they recaptured Jerusalem. They cleansed the temple by removing all the pagan statues and resumed Jewish worship. This is evidence that the Jewish people were God's chosen people. God chose them to be his people, although they had done nothing to deserve his love, and they were, as the Hebrew Bible says, a stiff-necked people. But it was through this stiff-necked people that God sent his Son to save the world. And you just saw a picture of that. But in order to relight the lampstand in the temple, they needed sacred oil. And they only had enough for 1 day. But it would take 8 days to produce enough sacred oil to keep the lampstand going. But they lit it anyway, and miraculously the flame kept going for 8 days. Ever since then, the Jews have celebrated the miracle and their freedom from oppression by lighting a menorah like this one. Now here is a menorah that is commonly used. The candle in the middle is often called the servant candle, and there are 8 candles on each side. Now, the lampstand in the temple did not have this many, but this is to remind everyone of the 8 days that the oil kept burning there in the temple. Now, the first candle is called the servant candle, and that's the one in the middle. And people often believe that the servant candle is really Jesus Christ. He is the servant. And so each of the 8 days of Hanukkah, the family will light another one of the candles until all 8 candles are lit. Each of the 8 days of Hanukkah, there is a different candle lit, and all are lit with the servant candle. In Jesus' time, the Romans had captured the land of Israel, and now the Jews longed for the days of Judah Maccabee when they had been freed. They longed for the days when the Messiah or the Christ would come and set them free. Even though Hanukkah was not one of the required Jewish holidays, it was still celebrated by the Jews for remembering the deliverance of the past and looking for the Savior. While Hanukkah is not directly involved with the coming of the Messiah, its themes of freedom and restoration resonate with messianic hopes. It is a date based on a lunar calendar, and so it is either in November or December of each year. While the Hebrew Bible does not mention Hanukkah, the New Testament does, and provides a reference to the holiday. In John's Gospel, he writes, quote, "Then the festival of the dedication came at Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was in the temple walking in Solomon's colonnade." The festival of the dedication is another name for Hanukkah. This passage suggests that Jesus was in Jerusalem during Hanukkah and was present at the temple at this time. The details that John gives in this part of the story indicate that John himself was an eyewitness to these events. No one else could have known the details that John includes in his account if they had not been there. This passage in John indicates that Jesus was aware of and participated in the social and religious life of his community, including being present during Hanukkah. Jesus was a very Jewish man. At Hanukkah, the Jewish leaders gathered around him and asked him very pointedly, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly." Now remember, we have to keep lighting our candles. So we're going to light another 2 candles. Now we have 4 of our 8 candles lit. And when we're finished, we'll have all 8 candles lit. Now, this question was not a friendly question to Jesus. It may have been made with a hostile spirit. This was to be the last confrontation between the leader of the Quiet Revolution and the Jewish authorities. The Jewish leaders were concerned that if he was the one who was sent from God, it would jeopardize their position, their power, and their status. John records that they said to themselves, quote, "If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away our place and our nation," unquote. Perhaps you are also concerned that if you put your faith and trust in Jesus as your Savior and Lord, it will jeopardize your position, your status, your influence, your power, your relationships, and your privileges. It is true of many of the religious leaders of Jesus' day. It says in John's Gospel, "Yet at the same time, many even among the leaders believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, they would not openly acknowledge their faith for fear that they would be put out of the synagogue, for they loved the human praise more than the praise of God." And remember, we keep lighting our candles as time goes on now. We're lighting more of the candles. Now we have 6 candles lit. When Hanukkah is finished, we will have all 8 candles lit. Then Jesus answered with his most pointed answer to the Jewish authorities. He answered, "I told you already, but you do not believe. The teachings and the miracles I do in my Father's name show who I am." The leader of the Quiet Revolution does not ask us to make a leap of faith to believe in him. He gives us overwhelming evidence, the evidence of his wisdom. John records in his gospel that the temple guards earlier had been sent to arrest Jesus, but they returned without him. When asked why, they said, "No man ever spoke like this man." There's evidence of the fulfilled prophecies of the Old Testament of the Messiah. There's the evidence of his miracles. John also records that the crowd said, quote, "Still many in the crowds believed in him, and they said, 'When Messiah comes, will he perform more signs than this man?'" Unquote. Jesus concludes by saying, "I and the Father are one." His Jewish opponents picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus said to them, "I have shown you many good works from my Father. Which of these do you stone me for?" This is a picture of what it may have looked like in those times when the Pharisees tried to stone Jesus. They said, "We are not stoning you for any good work," they replied, "but for blasphemy, because you, a mere man, claim to be God." John records that they tried to seize him, but he escaped from their grasp. The leader of the Quiet Revolution said he was the one from God, and the Jews were going to stone him for blasphemy. But the next story that John tells in his gospel relates the amazing story of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead when he'd been dead for 4 days. This miracle proves that the leader of the Quiet Revolution was one with the Father, for only God could do this. This miracle is also a preview of Jesus' own resurrection from the dead on Easter. Jesus was not to die on Hanukkah, but he was to die a few months later on a cross for the sins of all who believe in him, and that is why he came. The leader of the Quiet Revolution is the fulfillment of the hopes of Hanukkah. He did not come as a political leader like Judah Maccabees, who set up a kingdom for a few years, but he set up a kingdom that would last forever. So we're going to now light the last of our candles of Hanukkah. Now all the candles are lit. And it reminds us again of the great miracle where the oil lasted for 8 days in the temple as they rededicated the temple. And it reminds us that the candle in the middle was the most important, and it was the servant candle that reminds us of Jesus Christ. So to remember that Christmas is really the fulfillment of Hanukkah. But this is more than an interesting story. It is a call to decision. We must decide who the leader of the Quiet Revolution truly is. We must not delay. As the leader of the Quiet Revolution himself said, quote, "We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night comes when no man can work," unquote. There will be a day when it will be too late to decide. The greatest lie from the pits of hell is that, quote, "We have plenty of time to think about this, and we have more important things to do today," unquote. There's nothing more important than this. Now let me conclude with telling you the story of how a menorah, perhaps just like this one, saved the life of a Jewish family that was escaping from Nazi Germany. In those days, many Jews were trying to escape from Germany, and a Jewish family had gotten some falsified papers to try to get themselves through to the border and across. The papers were not true, and close examination would observe that these papers were not true, and anyone would know that they were false. But they were hoping they could get across the border. They were on a train heading towards the border. It was nighttime. As the train approached the border, the train stopped for everyone to have their papers checked. And inexplicably, and by the providence of God, all of the lights on the train went out. And so the father of the family did something unusual, something that everyone didn't expect. He took out his menorah, something like this one. And in the window of the train, he lit his menorah so that there would be light. The family was appalled. They thought, surely the Nazi soldiers would recognize this as a menorah and know that they were a Jewish family and take them all away to a concentration camp. They were appalled, but they could say nothing. The Nazi soldiers came aboard the train, and they came to where the father was with the menorah. And instead of recognizing that it was a Jewish symbol, they said, "Oh, how wise you were to bring some candles on a journey such as this. May we borrow your candles so that we can check the papers of everyone on the train?" The father said yes. And so the Nazi soldiers took the menorah and went and checked all the papers on everyone on the train. They came back and they brought the menorah back to the father. They again thanked him for letting them use his candles, but they did not check the papers of the father and his family. They got off the train went forward, and they went across the border to freedom. And as they did, the father said to the family, "You have witnessed a Hanukkah miracle." And indeed they had. Now this story I got from a rabbi, and rabbis don't lie, so I believe that the story is true. Well, thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have any comments or questions, please send them to WCTV 619 School Drive, or to the crawl of the email that's at the bottom of this screen. This has been G. McCubbin, number 13, Jesus, Hanukkah, and an Attempted Murder. Thank you very much.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.